Started? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a special edition of University Express, which is our online it's our adult education free learning program that's put on by Erie County Department of Senior Services. Today's class is on the American Disabilities Act, and I'm here with our speaker, Frank Cammarata. I want to mention this is our very first class we're hosting in this room with a whole bunch of brand new technology. So please, after the class is over, if you wouldn't mind sending us a little email and letting us know, is the audio good? Can you see us clearly? We'd greatly appreciate the feedback on that. Before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This class is being recorded. And if all goes as planned, we will be posting it to our website in the very near future. You have all joined today muted without your videos showing, and there's nothing that you can do about that. That's how all our classes are set up. So you haven't done anything wrong, just so you know. We'll be using our chat feature to communicate, which is located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It's a little box that looks like a comic strip word box. We'll be checking those throughout the program, and also we'll save some time at the end. So Frank will be able to answer any questions you might have. At this time, I'd like to introduce Frank and give you a little bit of his background. Frank has been a lifelong resident of Buffalo, New York. He graduated from St. Francis University of Pennsylvania with a BA in political science and also holds a Master's of Public Administration from Walden University. Frank began his career in human services with People Incorporated, serving numerous administrative roles over an 18-plus year span there. In January 2012, Frank was provided an opportunity for a new challenge with the election of Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz. Frank was appointed the Executive Director of the Office for People with Disabilities of Erie County. His primary responsibilities include advocating for all county residents who have a disability, serving as ADA coordinator, and providing linkage and referral to the numerous disability services in the area. Frank's most important role is personally assisting county residents with concerns and issues regarding their needs. Frank is also co-founder of Buffalo Racin', the Rolling Athletic Club Inclusion Network, to assist people with disabilities to participate in the local race scene. Frank is also a board member of the Disability History Museum, as well as the Dean of the Western New York Disability Education Advocacy Network. We're so happy to have Frank here with us today, and without further ado, I'll let him take over.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate it. Thanks for that introduction.
Sure.
That was terrific. It's almost like you wrote it. So welcome, everybody. And just so everybody is aware, Erie County Office for People with Disabilities is actually one of only five, Erie County is actually one of only five counties that provides an office with a direct advocate for people with disabilities. We are the only county, actually west of New York City, that provides such an office. And it's interesting because you consider all the different communities or all the different counties throughout New York State. I believe there's 63 of them. And you think about like Monroe County or Albany County or some of those other very large counties, and there is no representation, or I should say, not that there's no representation, but there's no direct advocacy for a person with a disability to work with county services, county government. So I've consider holding this position quite the honor for the past almost going on 12 years, which is terrific. Throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Lisa's going to
the chat right now for you.
All right, yeah, just I guess go to the chat and feel free to put your name in there. And if you have a question, jump in at any time. So we'll start off with the history of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act at this point is 32 years old. It's really 32 and a half years old. We celebrate the anniversary July 26th every year. This year it'll be 33 years old. So the idea of this presentation is to talk about how the Americans with Disabilities Act came about and why it came about, and just kind of give you other information with regard to people with disabilities. Oh, sorry. That's okay. So when we talk about legislation, I always like to talk about going back and really just talking about the history of pieces, because you need to know why and where pieces of legislation came from, if legislation came about. This first slide, I actually want to go even before this first slide. When we're talking about people with disabilities, I could go back to the early 1900s, almost 1909. There's something called eugenics, and eugenics during the eugenics movement, you had people with disabilities who, unfortunately, when they were born, doctors didn't know what to do with them. And sometimes parents had to make very difficult decisions with regard to, to keep that child or not. And some of those children were institutionalized, and some of those children were not. But that's actually one of the most difficult parts of the disability history. But as we look at disability legislation, that really started around 1945 with President Truman, and he signed Presidential Law PL 176, and that law was it was called the National Employee the Handicapped. We don't use the term handicapped any longer. We refer to people with disabilities as that, people with disabilities. But that law came about because of the veterans who were coming back from the war, and the veterans who had been injured, who had been wounded. And right in front of us, we actually have an image of a gentleman who has a prosthetic, who actually went to work, he came back from the war and went back to work. And the poster actually says, "America needs all of us, hire the handicapped through state employment service local offices." We still have those local offices. Here in New York State, it's called Access VR. It used to be called VESID, and VESID stood for Vocational Educational Services to Individuals with Disabilities. Access VR is, I believe it's Adult Career Education, and I always forget the next parts, but I guess being an older guy that I am, I still remember VESID, and it sticks with me. So. But that was really the earliest piece of legislation, and we still celebrate employment of people with disabilities, but we now call it National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We celebrate this each October, and we celebrate it we celebrate the employers, we celebrate the opportunities that are given to people, that are provided to people who have a disability. Again, here in front of us, this is the latest poster. It is from ODEP, or the Office for Disability Employment Policy, which is a federal office. Each year during Disability Employment Awareness Month, they put a poster out. This past year's poster, the theme of it was disability is part of the equity equation. And we have in front of us people who are using mobility devices, and people who are working and with a light bulb to the right of that saying this is a great idea. So you'll notice that throughout this presentation, I'm going to actually describe to you, I'm going to read to you the words, but I'm also going to describe to you the pictures that are on the frame. And I'm doing that actually because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because if we have somebody who is blind, visually impaired on this presentation, who's participating in this presentation, they now can participate equally, just like all of us. And that's the bottom line of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's about equal access and equal opportunity. Just like this poster is talking about, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, about equity and about ensuring that people can participate in the workplace. And we have an annual an annual presentation and actually an annual luncheon with a number of agencies that provide assistance to people with disabilities throughout Erie County. We do this, and it's been a great celebration. So with that, I'll move forward. We will continue with disability legislation. This next image is the image of the international symbol of disabilities with a gavel, just to kind of denote the need for legislation. So we move forward from the Hire the Handicap Week to really the very first piece of legislation to focus on civil rights. And it was the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which covered entities who receive federal funding. I think that's what you want to focus on right now. Any entity that's receiving federal funding need to ensure that they were prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, religion, and national origin. Notice that in that sentence that I just read, I didn't read people with disabilities. Actually, when they were writing this legislation, it was considered. Disability was being considered. Unfortunately, the Senate, the Congress wasn't going to move that way because of some difficult representatives. I'll leave it at that. But it's important to note that it was thought about, but it never really moved any further than that. Until a few years later, in 1973, we have what's called the Rehabilitation Act. Hopefully everyone has heard of the Rehab Act. Most people refer to it as the Rehab Act. But when you're talking about people with disabilities, it is specifically about Section 504 of the Rehab Act. And in that specific section, 504, that is prohibiting discrimination in federally funded programs on the basis of disability. That's where you get your first mention of people with disabilities and prohibiting discrimination. Unfortunately, again, we have more weakness in this legislation, similar to the Civil Rights Act. This time, though, it did not protect people with disabilities in the employment arenas or in public accommodation situations. So if you are a person with a disability and you're seeking a job, and your company was getting federal funds, unfortunately, the Rehab Act wasn't necessarily working for you. Okay, if you were going to a gas station or a movie theater, again, the Rehab Act wasn't necessarily working for you, but it's coming. I promise you. So in 1975, we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, that provided for the fact that all children with a disability receive a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So that was the opportunity for children or students to now be recognized, students with disabilities to be recognized that they should be receiving an education in the least restrictive environment. Up to that point, students with disabilities were in institutions. They were in separate schools. They weren't with their fellow peers. So the difficulty of that is their fellow peers, they didn't get a better understanding of people with disabilities because they weren't around them. But 1975 kind of brought that all to attention, and Congress created the IDEA Act. And then you have the advocacy movement. And when we talk about the early 1900s and the difficulties, it was really the Advocacy Act, as with any difficult law, as with any law that's passed in the United States. You have people who are for it, and you have people who are against it. You have laws that work for the people, and you have laws that just kind of do a general thing. But something that assists people with disabilities, unfortunately, it took a great deal of advocacy. And advocacy is how the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. In 1972, we unfortunately, New York State had an institution named Willowbrook. It had a very nice name. It was called the Willowbrook State School. And Willowbrook was basically just an institution, a place where people with serious disabilities and not so serious disabilities were housed, literally just housed. They had a bed and they were fed meals. And I can tell you that the caretakers, it wouldn't be like a meal like you and I are having on a daily basis. It would be a caretaker was responsible for 20 or 30 individuals, and they would basically spoon to mouth and onto the next person. It was an awful place. It actually was Senator Robert Kennedy in 1960, I think it was 1967, that he actually went to Willowbrook, and when he went into the Willowbrook institution, he actually walked around it. You know, as the United States Senator was able to walk around it, and actually walked out and stated, basically in simple terms, he said this place is a snake pit. Unfortunately, we all know what happened to Senator Kennedy, so nothing really moved forward with it. But in 1972, something very interesting and important happened. Geraldo Rivera, hopefully you all remember Geraldo Rivera. This was really his first breakthrough. He was working for, I believe it was ABC out of New York City, and he got a tip from a doctor who worked at Willowbrook Institution, and the doctor said, you know, I'd like you to come and see what's going on here, and I want you to you know, witness what's going on. So he actually provided Geraldo Rivera a key to get in, and when Geraldo Rivera broke in with a cameraman, the conditions were just deplorable, beyond deplorable, and honestly they were worse than when Senator Kennedy was visiting. Actually a movie was made of Willowbrook, and there's actually, you can actually Google. If you Google Willowbrook Geraldo Rivera, you can actually see the filming that Geraldo Rivera did, and the report. It's still being shown. To the right of the screen here, we actually have the film poster, Willowbrook, and it was from 2012. So the advocacy movement. It was, you know, the talk went on with regard to Section 504 in 1973. We talked about it, but it wasn't really until 1977, as you know, it takes a long time to get legislation passed, especially federal legislation, especially something like the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Civil Rights Act or the Rehabilitation Act. It takes a very long time. And throughout the process, there's, you know, senators and congressmen are making deals with each other. They're talking with the public. They're getting ideas. But the one federal department that was responsible for the Rehabilitation Act was the Health, Education, and Welfare Department, or HUE. And so they had to come up with all this legislation. Throughout the process, it was a daunting process. It took a great deal of time, and people with disabilities were kind of getting tired of waiting. You know, again, during the Civil Rights Act, they had an opportunity that got taken away from them. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act, again, they had an opportunity. It wasn't taken away, but it wasn't necessarily there yet. So they really had to get out there. They actually staged sit-ins in San Francisco and throughout the country. They had letter writing campaigns, phone calling campaigns, calling their Congress representatives to say, hey, we want this thing passed. We want this to become law. After a great deal of I don't want to say controversy, but after a great deal of advocacy, the regulations were finally passed in May 4th, 1977. So keep that in mind. That's 4 years later. So again, it takes a long time, but it did get passed. In 1988, the National Council on Disabilities advocated for the first draft of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I guess, when I do trainings, I always stress to people, keep this in mind. 1988, it's not really that long ago. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is really, it's a newer law, and it's one of those laws that is ever evolving. And it's evolving in our court system almost on a daily basis. But the National Council on Disabilities, we had that first draft in 1988, and then in the 100th Congress, Senator Weicker and Representative Coelho brought this issue to their bodies, and so it almost, we started to talk about it. The disability community asked people with disabilities. This is part of the advocacy piece. The disability community asked people with disabilities to write discrimination diaries, and these are real things, to document the inaccessibility and discrimination. If you think about where we were before 1990, hopefully you've all, as you get around in your community, you know what a curb cut is. A curb cut is that thing that is on a corner of a street, and there's that cut there to enable a person who uses a mobility device or somebody who has a mobility disability to actually get onto that curb. Without that curb cut, you're impossible for someone to get around in their community. That's just one example. But then May 9th, 1989, Senator Harkin, who actually has a brother who is deaf, and we have Senator Harkin and Senator Durnberger and Representatives Coelho and Fish. They introduced the ADA to the 101st Congress following multiple hearings. So again, the evolution of this takes a while. And throughout this process, you have people who are writing these discrimination diaries. You have people who are calling their representatives. You have people who are knocking on doors. You have people who are doing sit-ins. So you have all these wonderful advocacy organizations who are doing all this hard work. And right now I have a video for you to play.
I remember when we were trying to get the ADA passed, and I need to climb the steps. I want to climb the steps, and Wade said, "Go for it." So I got out of my wheelchair and I started climbing. Well, the next thing I know, I've got 50 cameras on me, and I've got mics all over me, and it's like the hottest day, the month of March, and and I'm like 8, 9 years old, and water, I need water. And I've got the little pamphlet in the back of my pocket that we're supposed to hand over to the politicians to get the ADA passed, and they say that it was the image of me climbing those steps that was the final decision to get the ADA passed. And I had to do it.
So what courage and strength that took. And that young lady, she's one of many people who actually abandoned their chairs and crawled up the stairs of the Capitol. So in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was finally passed by President George Bush. And while he was signing it into law, he said, "Let the shameful wall of exclusion come tumbling down," in reference to the Berlin Wall coming down a couple of years earlier. He also said that this is civil rights legislation for all persons with disabilities. It is a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And it provides for the equality of opportunity and equality of access. And I emphasized that before. Again, equal access and equal opportunity. That is what the Americans with Disabilities Act. It enables a person with a disability to participate in our community equally. It provides for full participation. It provides for the opportunity for independent living, as well as economic self-sufficiency. Here we have an image of President Bush at the signing ceremony of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The gentleman on the right, I should say that the image that you have in front of you is President Bush at the signing ceremony. And the gentleman to the right with the cowboy hat, his name, and he's infamous for the Americans with Disabilities Act because he's probably one of the people who really pushed hardest. His name is Justin Dart. And Justin Dart really pushed this thing through Congress and got it done for people with disabilities. So it's obviously the importance of it. It landmark legislation prohibiting discrimination against people with disabilities in employment, transportation, public accommodations, and really everything throughout life. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's broken up into 5 different titles. The first title is employment. Title I is employment. Title II is state and local government. Title III is public accommodations. Title IV is telecommunications. Title V is miscellaneous provisions. Title I, I'm gonna describe Title I in a little bit. Title II, I'm going to talk about that, and as well as Title III. Title IV and Title V, I'm not really going to talk about, but just so you're aware, telecommunications, everyone walks around with a cell phone nowadays. What I'm doing right now is talking to you using telecommunications, using technology. There is a requirement under the Americans with Disabilities Act to ensure that that full communication, that people understand what is going on, that the devices are accessible. And to be honest with you, the cell phones that we use, they are very accessible, and they are one of the most handy pieces of technology for people with disabilities to enable them to access the world about them. And then you have the miscellaneous provisions, which anything that doesn't fit in Titles I through IV, that's what the miscellaneous provisions. But I want to give you, how do we know who is qualified for the Americans with Disabilities Act? The way we know that is, if you're a person with a disability, you fit under one of these 3 prongs. You are a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. 2 is you're a person who has a history or record of such an impairment. And prong 3 is you're a person who is perceived or regarded as having such an impairment. And if you think about that first prong, substantially limit one or more daily life activities, think about those daily life activities, right? Here you go. There are so many things that we're doing. For instance, I'm talking to you right now. You're listening to me right now. You may be sitting and listening to this. You may be standing and listening to this. You may be eating while I'm doing this. You may be drinking some water. Hopefully you're breathing, right? Bending, concentrating. You're learning. These are all major life activities that everyone is doing all of the time. So if you have a substantial limitation in any one of those, and again, this is a very short list, but if you have a substantial limitation in any one of those, again, 2, the word substantial, okay, that is in the definition, right? Then you may be a person with a disability. So I talked about Title I before. I mentioned Title I before, but Title I is the employment piece. and it protects the rights of all citizens to equally participate in all aspects of employment, which includes the job search process, the application process, the interviewing, the competing for career advancement, and it focuses on businesses with 15 or more employees. It requires full access to every area of the workplace, including restrooms, break rooms, and any other recreational areas. And it focuses on reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations are something that I'm going to talk about a lot in this, okay? But if we want to focus on employment first, you know, if you're a person with a disability and you go to a business and they hand you an application and you're blind or visually impaired and you can't read that application, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation to have a large print made of that. You can ask for a Braille application, or you can actually ask for someone to fill that application out for you as a reasonable accommodation, okay? If you are somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing and you get to that application process or you get to that interview, you can request an American Sign Language interpreter to assist you with that interview. Those are just a few things, you know, that, you know, just the basic piece of employment, okay? Here in Erie County, and it's not just Erie County, it's actually New York State. New York State has a way to assist people with disabilities in employment. It's called the 55A process. And what that does, it enables a person with a disability, a qualified disability, and they get that qualification through Access VR, who I mentioned before. They go to Access VR and they get a letter that states that they are a qualified person, and they can present it to their local municipality. And if they find a position in their local municipality for which they want to, for which they are qualified to do, they can apply for that position without having to take a civil service examination. That is the 55A process. There's also a 55B process. 55B process is for state positions. So the 55A process, I probably should have said, the 55A process is for local and county governments. 55B is for state government. And then you also have, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it right now, but there's legislation for federal employment. And actually, that came down under President Obama. President Obama wanted to increase the numbers of people with disabilities hired in federal employment. So there is federal legislation as well. So those are all very important pieces because, you know, it increases the number of people with disabilities in our workplace. I guess I can't stress this enough. It also increases opportunities for diversity in employment opportunities, which is so very important. Title I also focuses on the restrooms, the break rooms, and the recreational areas. If you're employed somewhere, again, 15 or over, and you have a restroom and you're a person who uses a mobility device, hopefully there's a restroom that is fully accessible to enable you to utilize that. Hopefully there's a break room that provides enough space for you to utilize your mobility device. And so those are all very important pieces. Now, there's an image at the top, again, that it reads Title I employment, and the image is a person who's using a mobility device, who's doing work. We also have a person who has prosthetics working on a computer. So, these really, the person with the prosthetics working on the computer are examples of reasonable accommodations that employers make on a very regular basis. Reasonable accommodations. They are effective adjustments made to a job or public accommodation that enable qualified people with disabilities to participate in their community. Again, it's all about that qualified people, okay? It's all about that qualification piece. And again, what is that qualification piece? It's that three-pronged definition of disability, okay? So for you to, I guess, participate under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have to be qualified. And, an ADA coordinator can assist you, but it's really a doctor who's going to write you that note that says you are a person who has substantial limitations in specific areas, and then provide it to your employer. Okay? The person, you don't, as an employee, you don't have to mention the term reasonable accommodation. You may not even understand or know what the term reasonable accommodation is. You may never have heard of that term before. But that's the term that is used in the ADA. Hopefully, maybe after today, you'll be able to use that term a little bit more, now with a little greater understanding. So some of the accommodations that employers provide are modifying equipment, computer monitors, large screen monitors, keyboards for people who have physical disabilities. There are people who wear headpieces that type to type information into their computer. There's large print materials. There's braille materials, recorded materials. I have here that it may take some creativity and input from the disability community resources. One of the jobs that I do is I work with the community resources. There's a lot of wonderful community resources out there that have information on how to reasonably accommodate people. Yes, we're talking about Title I and we're talking about employment, but throughout life, people need to be reasonably accommodated as we go about in our daily lives. And people with disabilities are going about their daily lives. They need to be reasonably accommodated in a lot of places that they go to. So it's important if you don't know where to go or who to talk to. My office, which we'll give you the number at the end of this, we're more than happy to help you out with the number of resources. And we also have a resource guide that we put out for the community, what's available. But one of the things that has always kind of irked me a little bit is sometimes you hear of an employer who says, hey, I can't afford to have that interpreter, or hey, I can't afford to buy that large pen to enable that person to hold, that person who may have cerebral palsy and has a difficult time holding that pen. There are accessible pens. There's accessible, there's all sorts of accessible equipment. Now, to be honest with you, most of that stuff costs less than $500. There's an organization called the Job Accommodation Network. They're a terrific resource. There's an opportunity for you to go and get information. You can contact me. I can give you these numbers, but that's a resource that you can go to. It'll give you information on different disabilities and how to accommodate your employees. So state and local government, Title II, that's what I am. That's what everybody who's in this room, this is what we do. We work for a local government. So it's important that we understand the Americans with Disabilities Act, because we are public servants and we are here to serve everybody, and especially people with disabilities, okay? Because it protects the rights of all citizens. The ADA protects the rights of all citizens to equally participate in the processes of state and local government. Again, it's about that equal participation in the processes of state and local government, as well as to access government, as well as accessing government programs and services in a manner in which is integrated and does not exclude or discriminate. That's what the ADA is. It's about that equal access. So if you're a person with a disability and you have needs, but you can't get to your local municipality's building, or you can't go to a town hall hearing, or you can't acquire the services, the thing you need to do is reach out to your local government and say, hey, I'm a person with a disability. I need a reasonable accommodation. I need X, Y, and Z. And you know what, to be honest with you, chances are pretty good that they're gonna say, well, I don't know what to do, but I'll reach out. You could, again, reach out to me. I'll help you find that resource, and I'll gladly reach out to that agency or that business and explain to them what they could or should do. So again, Title II requires full access to buildings and facilities where governmental programs take place. There are a number of I want to say buildings, and I don't want to say City Hall in particular, because City Hall has been made accessible. But there are buildings like City Hall, main buildings where governmental operations take place, that are older buildings, built before 1990. Some of them were built in the 1800s, right? That's before accessibility was thought of. So what do you do if there's a town hall meeting and it's in a conference center where there's stairs and you're using a mobility device? Well, reach out, ask for an accommodation. Let's have that meeting someplace else. Let's have that meeting in an accessible location. And that's the whole idea of accessibility. Okay. A few other ideas. We need, as governmental entities, we may need to provide interpretation, ASL interpretation services for people who are deaf, hard of hearing. If hopefully throughout the pandemic and throughout storms and difficult times, hopefully the leadership of municipalities, the governmental entities, hopefully you'll see next to them an ASL interpreter. Why do we have that ASL interpreter? We have that person to provide effective communication to people who are deaf and hard of hearing, so that they understand exactly what is going on. Because if we don't have that ASL interpreter, they can't hear what's going on the television. They can't, they may not know exactly what is going on. What if there's an emergency, if they need to evacuate? It's very important. ASL interpretation is very important. So there's more examples include providing accessible seating at meetings, providing Braille handouts for people who are blind and visually impaired, and not just Braille handouts, but large print. If I may recommend something to all of you, if you're a business owner or if you're a governmental entity, one of the things that you always want to do when you're holding a public event, to make the public aware that it is an inclusive event, that it is an accessible event, put a little blurb at the very bottom of that flyer or poster or notification that says, if you need a reasonable accommodation, please contact, and whoever that contact is. So that if somebody who's blind, visually impaired comes and you're handing out flyers and they call you and they say, hey, I need something in large print, or if somebody who's deaf, hard of hearing gets in contact with you and says, I need an ASL interpreter so I can understand what's being said, the entity, you, the business, are now covered. If you don't do that, the person with the disability can actually file a complaint. These are lessons to be learned, but if I can help you out anyway, there's a good idea. Thank you, Kathleen. So one of my roles is ADA coordinator, as Elisa said at the very beginning. And ADA coordinators are required by the Americans with Disabilities Act in public entities that have 50 or more employees. We're required to have a grievance procedure and designate at least one responsible employee to coordinate compliance. The coordinator serves as the point of contact for individuals with disabilities to request auxiliary aids, services, policy modifications, and other possible reasonable accommodations. I know that here in the Rath building, I'm one of a few ADA coordinators. I know that Department of Social Services has one. I know that Buildings and Grounds has one. And we all work for the betterment of our community for people with disabilities, so that they can, again, participate equally in the governmental services that Erie County is providing. You know, if you're somebody with a disability and you're seeking assistance from a Department of Social Services, and you can't get to the building because you're in your home, because of weather, or because of transportation issues, because you don't have your own transportation. You know, as a reasonable accommodation, a municipality could call up, or I'm sorry, an individual could call up a municipality and say, hey, I'm a person with a disability, can you assist me with filling out that application? Can you send somebody over to help me fill out the application for services? That's just an idea of what an ADA coordinator does. And this is something that I do on a daily basis. So now we talk about Title III and public accommodations. There's an image up the top. It says Title III public accommodations, and there's a hotel. And that's just one example of what a public accommodation is. A public accommodation is anywhere that anybody can go that's open to the public. So it includes restaurants, theaters, gas stations, grocery stores, hotels, gyms, doctor's offices, etc. And all of those should be accessible to people with disabilities. Now, I know that, you know, it can be difficult at times, because there are mom and pop shops, there are small restaurants, there are, you know, but then there are also the Burger Kings, the McDonald's, the Regal theaters, the Hilton hotels, etc. That, you know, those are the ones, because of their size, because of the number of, you know, facilities throughout the United States, they must be accessible. Your mom and pop shops, your smaller restaurants, again, it's difficult, but one of the things, you know, if you're a person with a disability and you want to go to a restaurant and you notice that there's a step to get into, obviously making it not accessible for you, you can call them up and say, hey, I'm a person with a disability, I use a mobility device, can you reasonably accommodate me? And there's ways to reasonably accommodate, okay? They can provide a temporary ramp. They could provide services outside. You know, they could have the server come outside. They could bring a table and chair outside to reasonably accommodate a person with a mobility device. Okay, there are, again, it goes back to that creativity. I talked about that creativity just a little while ago, but businesses should take measures to provide access to a place of public accommodation from public sidewalks, parking, or public transportation. These include, but are not limited to, installing an entrance ramp, widening entrances, and providing accessible parking spaces. One of the examples that I use on a regular basis is during the Christmas shopping rush, when you go into stores and they have the display racks and they are crowding, the display racks are crowding the store. By law, by the Americans with Disabilities Act, there needs to be at least 36 inches of space to enable a person who uses a mobility device to actually get around that store. You, the person who uses that mobility device, if you're finding that, you could say something to the store manager and explain to them that, you know, you're finding it difficult. And you could say, can you reasonably accommodate? They may be able to assist you in your shopping. There are actually, you know, local grocery stores that, if you're a person with a disability, they'll assist you with your shopping. You may see service animals who are out there who are assisting their handler with their assisting. That service animal may be grabbing a can of corn off of that shelf. It may look difficult to you, but that's how that person with a disability gets around in the community. That's how they're reasonably accommodating themselves. Other examples, I talked about display racks, rearranging tables providing braille, raised character signage, providing visual alarms, and installation of grab bars in bathrooms. I have a friend who's visually impaired, and we whenever we go to a restaurant, he actually asks the server to read the menu to him, so that he'll actually ask for a large print menu first, and if they don't have it, he'll actually ask the server to read that menu to him. That's how restaurants can reasonably accommodate. That's, again, one example. So that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. And now I'm just going to kind of touch upon the disability awareness piece. Why are we going to talk about disability? Why do we talk about disability awareness? It's to remove barriers so that responsible, self-sufficient people with disabilities can assume risks, make choices, and contribute as they wish. That's a very important sentence, because if I take you back to when we talked about Willowbrook, when we talked about eugenics, when we talked about pre-Rehabilitation Act, when we talked about pre-Civil Rights Act, you had people with disabilities who are very responsible people, who want to be self-sufficient. But unfortunately, we took away their choice. We took away their opportunities to contribute. We took away their opportunity to take a risk. So, we talk about disability awareness so that we're enabling people with disabilities. We want to remove those barriers. We want to allow people, I shouldn't say allow, we want to enable people with disabilities to be able to make their own choices, to contribute, to take some risk, right? This next sentence is probably one of the most important things I always like to leave people with. And I want people to understand that people with disabilities are the largest minority that anyone can join at any time in their life. It's one of those things, if you go outside, if you're in a building right now and you go outside and you're walking on the street and all of a sudden something happens to you, you're in an accident, or all of a sudden you're stricken with an illness, because you never know what's going to happen to you, you may be that person who joins that largest minority. Again, people with disabilities are the largest minority that anyone can join at any time of their life. Just some quick statistics on disabilities. There's about almost 31 million people who have difficulty walking, and actually, this University Express is provided through our Senior Services Department. The number one, or really the number one disability for people who are aging is mobility. So obviously you can see that statistic here. Almost 31 million people are affected by that. 12 million people require assistance of others with everyday tasks. 8 million people are blind, visually impaired. Almost 8 million people are deaf, hard of hearing. 3.6 million people use a wheelchair or other mobility device. There's a lot of different mobility devices out there. There's a lot of scooters out there. There's a lot of walkers out there. And almost 2.5 million people have Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. So these are the numbers, and unfortunately they are growing. Nationally, about 19% of the population is a person with a disability. Again, 9 million people have difficulty with an activity of daily living. 4 million have a learning disability. About 11 million people experience both physical and mental disabilities. Here in Erie County, it's about the same. Again, it's about 19%. The statistic that I'm giving you there, that 10.5%, keep in mind that is the working age population, okay? So that doesn't include people who are, before the age of 18 or who have retired. So, the statistics are pretty close. Some disability categories that we want to talk about, touch upon. Types of disabilities include emotional disabilities, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, intellectual or developmental disabilities, and sensory disabilities. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. Just some physical disabilities. A person who has a cerebral palsy, a person who has a learning disability. We know what learning disabilities are. A person who has intellectual developmental disabilities. A person who has sensory disabilities. That could be somebody who's deaf, hard of hearing. That could be, that's one of those ones that affects senses. So blind, visually impaired, deaf, hard of hearing, those types of things. And we all understand people who have mental health disabilities. Keeping in mind that actually 1 in 4 persons at some point in time of our lives may have a mental health disability. So the numbers speak for themselves. Locally, we have a huge number of organizations. This list that I have here in front of you, these are local disability service and advocacy organizations. This honestly barely scratches the surface of really all the different services that are out there. But I'll read it off to you. We have an organization called Center for Self-Advocacy. We have the Western New York Independent Living Center. We have the Epilepsy Association. We have the Developmental Disabilities Alliance of Western New York, or DAWNY. We have Deaf Access Services. We have Headway of Western New York. Headway is the one organization that actually assists people who have a traumatic brain injury. And that may include people who have a stroke, because a stroke is considered a traumatic brain injury. We have an organization called Self-Advocacy Association of New York State. We have the Western New York Developmental Disabilities Services Office, which provides services to people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. We have the Northeast ADA Center. There are actually 10 ADA centers throughout the United States. The Northeast ADA Center is in Central New York. It's in Ithaca, and it's a great resource if you have questions about the ADA. Again, you can call my office, but you could also call the Northeast ADA Center. A legal advocacy organization, Disability Rights of New York, a terrific organization, and that's where you get legal assistance. Job Accommodations Network, I spoke about that already. There's an organization that assists people who are employed, or people who are looking for work, or really, they assist employers who are looking for ways to accommodate employees with disabilities. We also have mental health advocates here in Western New York, and we have VIA. VIA used to be Olmsted. VIA, and they changed their name about a year ago, and it's Visually Impaired Advancement, I believe, is what VIA is. And then you have the New York State Commission for the Blind. And again, those are just a few, just naming a few of the organizations that assist people with disabilities here. So just some quick etiquette tips, and I actually have a little piece to the left of this, to the tips here, to the etiquette tips, and it says etiquette: speak directly to a person with a disability, not to his companion. And there's a little cartoon here. You have 3 people: a man to the left, a person who uses a mobility device in the middle, and a woman on the right. And the woman says to the man, "So what are Robin's plans for this Christmas?" And Robin, who's the mobility chair user, mobility device user, actually says, "I am Robin, and I am right here, paralyzed, but my hearing is fine." It's a perfect example of when you're talking to a person with a disability, or when you're talking to a family with a person with a disability, focus on that person with the disability. Talk to that person with the disability. See them first, and not their disability. Get to know that person. Work with the families and staff if you have to, but work with the person first. See people in the context of their community, and ask before you provide any assistance. Don't ever grab somebody's wheelchair and start to move them about. if they want assistance, they'll let you know. Keeping in mind that, making contact with their wheelchair or their assistive device is pretty much the equivalent of me grabbing somebody's purse or me grabbing somebody's wallet. It's very personal to a person who uses a mobility device. So, if you want to assist somebody, ask them before you do that. Be sensitive. And don't make assumptions of a person's abilities. Again, ask them first what they're able to do. Annually, we have an event. It's called Spread the Word for Inclusion. It used to be called Spread the Word to End the R Word. I'll mention the R word soon enough, but the Spread the Word to End the R Word was begun by Special Olympics, and it focuses on making sure that people stop using the R word. We don't want people to use the R word. I'll mention it in a moment. If you haven't picked it up yet, hopefully you have. But if you haven't picked it up, you'll know exactly what that word is. But annually, the event is held on the first Wednesday of March. So actually, this March the 1st, we will be holding our Spread the Word for Inclusion event here in Western New York. To focus, again, the focus hasn't changed on the R word. We still want to end that, but the focus is more on inclusion, including people with disabilities in everything that we do in our lives. So if you can come out, we're actually going to be at the Tri-Main building on Main Street on March the 1st at, I believe, 10 o'clock, from 10 to 1. Come out and say hello to us. So here it is, some language to avoid. Because so many, or not so many, but actually all of these are medical terms. Believe it or not, all of these are medical terms that used to be used. But they have, they're words that we don't need to use anymore. The terms include idiot, dumb, imbecile, moron, feeble-minded, retard, handicapped, cripple. All of those terms are words that we don't want anyone to be using anymore. I understand that these are words that you've heard throughout your life, but things change. People have changed. We've advanced. We've evolved. We don't need to use these terms anymore. We can, focus on that person. Talk to that person. You've noticed that I have not said I've not said handicap throughout this presentation because handicap is a word that people with disabilities, notice I'm saying people with disabilities because I'm using that person first language, but people with disabilities don't want people to refer to them as handicapped. All of the terms in front of you have very negative connotations at this point. And so we want these words to end. Just like spread the word to end the R word. And by the way, there's your R word. So I'll leave you with this. If we cannot now end our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. Stated by John F. Kennedy. That's who's in front of you right now. Again, I'm Frank Cammarata from the Erie County Office for People with Disabilities. The information is in front of you. Thank you very much for your time today. My email address is frank.a.cammarata, that's CAMMARATA, @erie.gov. And my office number is 716-858-6215. Please feel free to get in contact with us. Need any information. Again, we have a guide to services that we're happy to mail out to people. We're more than happy to answer any questions that you may ever have about reasonably accommodating, assisting with county services, etc. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Our office is open 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Frank.
You're very welcome.
And you can also get in touch with us at University Express if you are looking for any information about any of the agencies that Frank mentioned, you can contact Frank, and we also work with New York Connects. We're always here to help. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day, and watch for our new catalog for University Express. We'll be back out and about in the community in the centers in May, but our catalog should be out sometime around the beginning of April. So we hope to see you all again real soon. Take care. Have a great day.
Question.
Oh,
I
we
have
have
a
a
question.
question.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So one, are you going, is a handicap tag still called a handicap tag, or is it a
That's a
disability?
great question.
What a great question, Kathleen. Thank you for asking
You
that.
can use my idea. It's fine.
Yes. Well, actually, so the simple answer to you is no. I do not refer to it as a handicap tag any longer.
Right.
It is an accessible parking spot or an accessible hang tag
Okay.
or an accessible restroom, right? As opposed to a
Accessible.
handicap restroom, right?
So
Or-
when you go to apply for a handicap parking tag, it will be an accessible parking tag.
Ooh, well, you know, if you call my office, it's an accessible hang tag. If you call other offices, again, we are still evolving, and I work with people in county government all the time. I will tell you that one of the events, actually, we hold it twice a year. We do a non-driver ID event. We
Okay.
work with the county clerk's office to enable people with disabilities to get a non-driver ID, because you need an ID to go places, to do things. So keep an eye out for that. It's usually in March and October. It's probably going to be April this year, is my guess. But so unfortunately, I'm sorry. Yes, people still do use the term handicap, but I'm working on
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
it.
So, and then I had a question because a neighbor has a disability. He lives in the city, and he was wondering, since I worked for the county, he lives kind of near Canisius College and in between Buff State and Canisius. So, he was wondering, could a resident get a handicap or a accessible parking spot for themselves because they live there, so that it would be marked as accessible, so that there would be a spot for him. I mean, he's got to struggle getting in and out of the car, walking down the sidewalk. You know, he goes out, somebody takes the spot.
So I think she means he doesn't have a driveway.
So, okay, so you know what, Kathleen, what I'm gonna recommend to you right now, the city of Buffalo is hiring an ADA coordinator. That person is not in their position yet. What I would recommend to that person is have them reach out to their councilman, their city councilman. They may also want to reach out to, I think it's a parking bureau for the city. But I would reach out to the council representative first
Well,
and make that request.
Is there such a thing where someone can have it identified as accessible parking in a residential neighborhood? Kind of like you'd find downtown close to office buildings.
So I mean, there are, if you're here at the Rath Building, across the street on Franklin, there are a couple of accessible parking meters.
Mhm.
The reality is, I'm probably gonna say no, but, you don't know the answer unless you reach out and make that request. So that's why I said, reach out to the city council representative.
All right. Will do. Thank
All
you.
right, sure, or have them call me.
Okay.
And Frank
I will
mentioned
do
a
that.
lot of events that he has upcoming. I will get Frank to share those dates with us, and we can publicize them on our University Express Facebook page and website. So we'll make all of the older adults on this program and anyone who watches in the future, you can easily sign up for our Facebook page or always go on our website, and we'll make sure that you're well aware in advance of Frank's upcoming events. Do we have any more questions through the chat or otherwise for Frank before we sign off for the day? It looks like you covered everything in your presentation. How's that?
Again, thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Appreciate it.
Good weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks
Be
for
safe.
joining us.